I'm Walter Isaacson of the Aspen Institute, and I'm with Jeffrey Rosen of the National Constitution Center talking about the Constitution. And now let's move on to Article 2. That's the one about the president, and it starts by saying the executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States. What does that mean?
Well, it means that the executive power and all of the executive power shall be vested in the president. And that has led to many of our most hotly contested controversies today, because the question is, can Congress impinge on the executive power? And debates over war-making power and the power to declare recess appointments and the scope of the president's power in the war on terror, all of that turns on what it means to have executive power vested in a single president.
And this is one of those articles that's been amended a lot, like how do we choose a president? And you see, if you read your Constitution, some of it's in brackets, and they get very specific, like the electors shall meet in their respective states, and then some amendment comes along and changes that. Why did they get so specific?
My goodness, well, it is among the most dizzying of all constitutional provisions. The original electoral system was extremely complicated, and we can read it in brackets. It basically, the top vote getter would be president, and number 2 would be vice president.
That led to a mess, didn't it?
It was not a great idea. So the Constitution was amended. We have our current electoral college system, and many people think that too is a bit of a mess, because it can lead, as it has on occasion, to the winner of the popular vote losing the presidency because doesn't win the majority of electoral votes. But the framers were so concerned about not creating a king and also accurately representing both small states and large states that they debated tremendously how the president
And I think
elected.
we have to remember that nobody had ever done this before. Nobody had ever written down, how are we going to choose the leader of a great nation?
I mean, this is an amazing accomplishment. Alexander Hamilton is standing up in the Constitutional Convention and saying the president should be elected for life. He wanted to have a monarch. John Adams wanted to be addressed as His Executive Majesty. So the idea of an elected president with limited terms was a revolution and is an incredible contribution.
And so that's why they had to sort of get themselves a bit tied up in exactly how are we going to accomplish this? Because they couldn't just have everybody in the United States vote all at once, the way we would think you could do today, right?
Nowadays, of course, many people think that's the only natural way to elect a president is by popular vote. But not only were they not ready to do that because of balancing large and small states, but they also didn't think of themselves as an unchecked democracy. It was a limited republic. They were balancing rural and agrarian interests, and all of that comes through in Article 2.
Yeah, when we get to Section 2 of Article 2, once again, you have this Constitution enumerating the duties and powers of, as they did with Congress in Article 1, now they're doing it with the President. So it says, the President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy. What was that all about?
Civilian control of the army was a central contribution that the framers were making. They feared Napoleon and military dictators. They wanted to make sure that the armed forces were subordinate to the president, so that was an incredibly important clause.
But then why did they say that Congress shall have the right to declare war, but then say the president shall be commander-in-chief? Doesn't that lead to a tension?
That tension was central to their thinking. They don't want the elected president to have unchecked power. War has to be carried out with congressional approval, and the balance between those two clauses is again hotly contested today. When Congress passed a war powers resolution requiring the president to report after he sends troops without congressional consent, some claim that violated the commander-in-chief clause, which vests military power in the president extensively. So the boundaries are still being very hotly debated.
Yeah, I think they started debating it with George Washington, who was very much in favor of allowing Congress the power to declare war, until suddenly he got into a bit of a mess with the Indians. And he said, I'm commander-in-chief, I just get to go do this. And even today, we're trying to figure out, even our most recent wars have not really been formally declared by Congress, right?
They have not at all. You're absolutely right, of course, that George Washington was the first president, and it's remarkable how many presidents have insisted that they have the power without congressional approval to send the troops. The most recent drama over that, well, we've had examples in Syria and other places, but after 9/11, Congress did pass a use of force resolution authorizing the president to go hunt down al-Qaeda, and several presidents have invoked that resolution to claim far broader powers than some people think Congress initially authorized.
It also says the president, he shall have the power, by and with the advising consent of the Senate, to make treaties And then goes on to talk about appointing ambassadors, everything else. Did they mean to put the conduct of foreign policy in the hands of the president mainly?
I think there was a concern that under the Articles of Confederation, any kind of treaties, both economic or in terms of foreign policy, were impossible because you had to have unanimous agreement of all states. So yes, indeed, the president's supposed to be in charge of foreign policy.
And the next clause is something we're still fighting over even this very recently, is why they put this in. The president shall have the power to fill up all vacancies that may happen during the recess of the Senate.
This is a wonderful clause. It was obviously very important in an age when Senate recesses took a long time and transportation was slow and it was hard to actually get back to Washington to approve nominees. But as you say, just recently the Supreme Court decided that although the president can appoint recess appointments when Congress is out of session for more than 10 days, he can't do it when during the time when Congress just gavels itself in and out of session for less than 3 days. There, the Supreme Court said Congress is the judge of when it's in session and when it's not. It was a wonderful temporary slap to President Obama because he lost a few recess appointments, but it broadly vindicated the power exercised thousands of times over the past 100 years to make these recess appointments.
It just shows how there's still that little tug of war based on these clauses of what's the power of the Congress, what's the power of the president.
Isn't it healthy? And the fact that you can make good arguments on both sides and that the court weighs in ensures that power doesn't become too centralized.
And when we come back, we'll do Article 3. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Pleasure.